Boundaries are those stubborn lines that have been drawn or markers that have been established that tell us you can't go past this point, not at least without some sense of consequence. Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah, day number 3, the Torah portion of Vayelech. So let's go a little bit further in this concept today that Moshe says, I can go this far but no further. I've come to the end of my time. Today I'm going to die. This is it, my last hurrah. And it's because Yah said, I'm not allowed to go across the Jordan, and that's where you're going. So I'm going to climb this mountain today, and I'm going to pass away. Again, he didn't go because he was dying. He went to die. That is, that, as the rabbis say, Yah would give him the kiss of death. That is, that Yah would kiss him, and the spirit of Moshe, the inner man, the inner dwelling, would leave and go into the presence of the Most High. And naturally, without that inner man, that inner spirit there, the body ceases to exist for any purpose, so it dies. All right. So there is a boundary here. There is a place where Moshe says, I can go no further. In reality, the Torah is a book of boundaries. Just reading through Bereshit chapter number 1, one of my favorite chapters, there is a boundary between heaven and earth. The body of water that used to connect the two has been divided and separated. There is boundaries that are placed, or there are boundaries that are placed around the hours of the day and the hours of the night. Boundaries pertaining to how food is to be replicated. Fruit is supposed to have the seed of the fruit within it that will replicate that same fruit. Man finds himself wise enough, though, to believe that he can violate these boundaries and get by with it. When Yah says these are the meats of animals that you're permitted to eat, man has argued the point and says, but this tastes good even though it is listed as unclean. However, anything that I bless can be magically transformed from unclean to clean. And if I ask the Father to bless it and I thank Him for it, then I should be able to eat it. Isn't man wise? Haven't we matured and haven't we come so far that we can see a transformation of meat on a plate from one nature to the other just by praying a 30-second prayer, or sometimes less? Matter of fact, you can allow the youngest child at the table to pray the prayer that quick. The food goes from biblically unclean to acceptable in the eyes of the master, and he understands. After all, he will not send us to hell over a ham sandwich, as I have been told. So we continue on. Boundaries. The Torah is full of boundaries. It describes for us what is permissible, what is not, in our business dealings, in our family relationships, and our worship practices, and our understanding of truth, and the way that we relate to the nations that are around us, how that we are to be governed, what our kings and sovereigns are allowed to do, what they're not, how the priesthood is to function, the prophets, and so on. Everybody's got boundaries. Regulations, if you will, rules, if you will. But the Father clearly marks His boundaries and allows us to understand what is agreeable to Him, what is not. And it is when we live within these boundaries that we find shalom, that we find healing, that we find wholeness, that we find that we get along with people. Imagine that. There are scholars that would have us to believe that the boundaries are about that big around, and to try to squeeze all of our living inside that small, minuscule boundary, well, it's just unreasonable, unthinkable, and it's just religious law. And therefore, Yeshua has come to deliver us and to take away all the boundaries. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. He came to enforce the boundaries, to more clearly declare the boundaries, and then to teach us to live within those boundaries with the fullness of joy. The boundaries are immense. I can't put my hands wide enough. The screen's not big enough for me to show you how big, how broad the boundaries are. There's plenty of room to enjoy life within the boundaries that the Father has set. But let's go a little further. There are boundaries that, while the Torah boldly declares and officially states what they are, there are some boundaries that need to be discerned. Let's discuss just a few of those. We're talking about discerning the limits that the Ruach HaKodesh would place upon us. Now again, the Ruach is not going to teach us boundaries that the Torah does not substantiate or is not foundational to. But in personal application, there are some things that we need to spiritually discern. For example, when Yah puts extra money in our hands, and the Ruach says, that money is not for you, it's for someone else's needs, someone else's situation. Are we willing to discern that before we run on a spending spree? Maybe Yah is saying to us, hold on to that money, save it, don't spend it. And immediately we find things on Amazon, and we find things on Trash and Treasures on our Facebook page and Marketplace and at flea markets. Listen, if Yah has put extra money in your hands and he's told you to save it and hold it back and not to spend it, don't go looking in the windows and shop, knowing that Yah says no, lest you tempt yourself. Maybe some things such as holding on to some relationships when Yah says, let them go. Now, that's not very popular. We want to save everybody. We want to redeem everybody. We want to fix everybody. But there are times that, as Rav Shaul said, turn that brother over to Hasatan. That basically he becomes sorry for his sinful life because he's refused to repent. There are some relationships that are not healthy, that are not beneficial, maybe even abusive. It may not be physical abuse, but it could be abuse in another form. Yah does not ask you and I to tolerate an abuser because they say the right religious words or phrases. Sometimes the Ruach HaKodesh is saying, get away, stay away. It's an unrighteous influence. But I can fix them. I can help them be changed. If the Ruach is saying no, don't argue. And it could be that you may claim a carnal indulgence that says, it won't affect me. If it affects somebody else, very likely, most likely, it will also affect you. Especially if it's an indulgence of the carnal flesh. It's amazing how often we argue with the Ruach HaKodesh over these things. Such things as knowing when to go, when to stay. Here's a big one. When the Ruach is saying to us in a conversation, shh, hush, shh, shh, no more. Leave it right there. Don't take that any further. I got one more thing I want to say. we always have one more thing we want to say. When the Ruach says, hush, learn to bite your lip and hold your tongue. Give them a little bit and let them chew, then back off. Allowing curiosity to get the best of us. When we should have turned and gone somewhere else. One more look, one more gaze. No, leave it alone. The Torah declares boundaries. And the Ruach takes those boundaries and teaches us how to live within them, sometimes in some very specific ways. Listen to his voice. More tomorrow. To then, shalom.